This is Arvette McLean
And Diana Wright.
of Speak, The Universe Listens.
So today's topic is your thoughts can make you well. So Arvette, what do you think about that?
Well, I actually like that topic. Your thoughts can make you well. Because we always talk about how your thoughts can affect your health negatively. And we're pretty much aware that stress thoughts cause stress chemicals, causes disease in your body. But then the reverse of that is also true. So healthy thoughts, good thoughts, loving thoughts, they also create chemicals in your body. And they produce results in your body that are beautiful. And so I think a lot of times people in a certain field, they will say, I'm going to heal myself. And so a lot of times they might not seek medical care because they feel like they can heal themselves. And so I might have something to say about that. But in general, I do believe that the thoughts that we think can actually make us well.
I agree with that. And I've talked about this before with my mom. And when she was diagnosed with cancer, and of course they gave her their prognosis, and she was such a strong woman, because a lot of times when you hear the word cancer, you have all of these things, it's a death sentence and all of those kind of things, but she was determined that the prognosis was not going to end up the way that that they said. So she didn't think about anything negative. She didn't want anything negative around her. Relationships that were kind of damaged, she repaired those things, and all she focused on was being happy and getting better. And she, even though she succumbed to the disease, but they gave her 6 months in the beginning, and she lived for 2.5 years. And I'm a strong believer that she lived that long because of her thought process, because she refused to succumb to it and have those negative thoughts.
I actually heard someone, a physician who studies this type of thing, like epigenetics and like how your cells work and the chemicals in your body and what happens. And they say that actually when a doctor gives someone the prognosis, you have 3 months, you have 6 months, it's really like they're giving you a prescription. Because we tend to believe what the doctors say. We've been taught to believe what the doctors say. And so once they say that, they can even say, let's say they give you somebody else's diagnosis, then you'll believe it and you will actually die
From that.
right, from that prognosis. And so that just goes into how powerful the mind is. And again, the chemicals that your thoughts create that then formulate and pulsate throughout your body.
And it makes perfect sense, like what you were talking about. It's a seed that's been planted, and then we typically as humans, we allow it to grow, and then your body just takes over because this is what your mind thinks. And it just grows and grows, versus in the sense of flipping that. And I can also say it for myself, when I was going through a difficult time several months ago, and I kept getting sick. I was sick, but I kept getting worse and worse. I was stressed out, I was depressed, and the more I was thinking those negative thoughts, the worse I got, the worse I felt. And just one day I just like, I am tired, I'm tired of laying in the bed, this is just not going to happen. I started thinking happy thoughts. I immediately decided I'm going to beat whatever this is. Even I had a diagnosis that I had high blood pressure. And I'm like, no, and all of this happened in the span of maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But I decided that I wasn't going to accept that. I got out of the bed. I started walking every day. I started opening up the blinds. I said, I'm not going to be depressed. And I got better. And that was because I changed my thought process. So I was able to do that myself. So I do know that it works.
Yeah. And I like talking about kind of like illnesses that are, I guess would be short-term duration, maybe like cold, flu, maybe bronchitis, that type of thing, headaches. And because you can change those almost on a dime, in a sense. And I remember I used to always have these terrible pains in my stomach to the point where you might literally open the door and I'm laying on the floor in pain. Yeah, like in a ball or whatever. And so I had stopped having those. And then one day, just out of the blue, it happened, and I was like driving or something, and I was just not okay. And I'm just like, what am I going to do? Because I have to get from point A to point B, but I'm not okay right now. And so then I was just like, you know what? I tell my body what to do. And so I was like, I started saying, I'm in perfect health because I tell my body what to do. And I just kept saying it, and the pain just went away. And the same thing happened. I was in a bike event, and I was riding the bike too fast for myself, right? And so I don't know what got into me. I guess, you know, you get out there.
Adrenaline.
Yeah, you're thinking, oh, I can catch up with him. So I was riding the bike, and when I got to, I think about, I can't even remember now, but maybe like around mile 40-ish, I was just like, I made a mistake. I don't think I'm going to finish this event, you know. And so the event that I was doing was like a 100-mile event, but you had the option of stopping at like 69 miles or something like that. So I was like, my legs were just shot, and I was like, I'm going to have to stop at 69. And I was just like beating myself up, like, why did you ride so fast? And you know, your legs can't handle that. You're not used to doing it that fast for this distance or whatever. I just kept beating myself up, but I was like, I'm going to have to cut it short. And then I remembered, I tell my body what to do. And so I just started chanting that, I'm in perfect health. I tell my body what to do. And I was like, you know, just because your leg's tired, that doesn't mean you can't pedal. And I was just like telling my body all kinds of stuff. And next thing you know, I had passed mile 69, and I just kept on going.
So you didn't even focus on the other thing. Your whole environment changed just by your thoughts and what you were telling yourself.
A lot of times, the illness and disease that we tend to focus on, though, are the bigger things, like you had mentioned cancer, and you know, high blood pressure, the diseases like maybe multiple sclerosis, those types of things, which aren't, you know, just, okay, let me think something different,
Right.
And then it'll instantly resolve itself. Now, I believe that can happen. I really do, because I've heard of lots of spontaneous remission stories, just by virtue of changing your thought process. But a lot of times those thoughts are deeply embedded, and it's the thoughts that we've been having for a long time. And I love the study of epigenetics. And, you know, I think I'm going to go to school and learn more about that, because I just think it's so fascinating. And I'm not going to sit here and try to give you a definition of what it is, but the first person who really started talking about it is Bruce Lipton, and he started back in 1968. But most people think of epigenetics as a new phenomenon. Maybe within the past 10, 15 years it's become popular. But what basically it is prior to the research that's developed with epigenetics, the thinking was that your genes controls your fate. Basically, you inherit your disease, your genes, and whatever is on those genes, that's what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much what's going to happen. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, he actually he was studying stem cells, and he took one cell and put it in a culture medium, and every 10 hours that one cell would double. So in 10 hours is 2, and 20 hours is 4, etc. And so over the course of a week, he had 50,000 identical cells. And then he put those in 3 different culture mediums. And basically a culture medium is like similar to blood. So he put them into 3 different environments. So one was from muscle cells, one was from fat cells, and one was from, I can't remember the other one, bone cells. So he put the cultures in, and those cells The ones that were in the bone culture became bone.
Okay.
The ones that were in the fat cells, they became fat. And the ones that were in the muscle cells became muscles. And so he's like, wait a minute. These all were identical cells, but they're responding differently based on their environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what opened the door to the ideal that, okay, a gene is not fixed in stone. It depends on what the environment is.
So I was also doing some, when we were talking about this podcast, and I was doing some research, and with Dr. Lipton, and one of the things he said, which surprised me and got me a little bit interested in the sense of that it's less than 1% of diseases are caused by our genes.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were talking about in the sense that, okay, high blood pressure. Well, everyone in my family has high blood pressure, so I wasn't thinking I'm going to get high blood pressure. I was actually mad when my doctor told me that, and I was like, no, this is not going to happen. But diabetes, that is the first thing that you actually think. But it's so interesting that it's not our genes, it's our environment, it's how we eat, it's how we think. And it's also our belief system as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing that he specified in terms of environment, like you would say, well, maybe your cells aren't exposed to your environment, but it's the environment of our body.
Mm-hmm.
And because whatever we're thinking, that produces chemicals, and then those chemicals, surround our organs and our cells, and so they're in this culture medium, which is our blood, and our blood is basically pulsating with whatever hormones and chemicals we're releasing.
Mm-hmm.
And so environment can be perception.
Okay.
So two people could be in the exact same environment, like we're both here together, but my perception could be that this is just the most wonderful thing, and your perception could be the opposite. And so let's say if we work at the same job and I'm thinking, this is the best job ever, and you're thinking, oh my God, I hate going there. And we both worked there for 20 years. You may have some health issues develop as a result of 20 years of thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I could be totally fine.
And that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he had made kind of like an example of some of his readings, his writing, and he had made an example and kind of broke it down like a car, like a vehicle, and a vehicle breaks down, and the first thing we're thinking about, okay, so it's a mechanical problem. And he kind of basically stated, well, we forget that there is a driver. We're the driver. So what did the driver do? What type of environment did we put the vehicle in? So it's not necessarily the vehicle, it's the driver and it's the environment. So everything, when he was talking about epigenetics, that it's all around us. It's what we eat, it's what we think, it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. So when you start kind of doing the research and really thinking about it, you get kind of hooked on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I wanted to point out is about like stress hormones or fear.
Mm-hmm.
So fear produces very specific chemicals. And basically fear and stress, those types of things, they produce chemicals that actually will shut down the immune system and that will shut down the whole growth process. And so, as adults, we might say, well, why do we need to grow? We're grown, but really we lose billions of cells every day. And so they have to replenish. And so if we're shutting down our hormones, our growth system on a daily basis because of the amount of stress that we may be faced with, then imagine how your cells are reproducing. Maybe not as strong, maybe not as quickly, and that's how disease comes about. But by the same token, if we're, like when a person is in love, it's like they produce a whole different set of chemicals. So when you're in love, you produce things like dopamine and oxytocin and growth hormones and stuff like that. And so a lot of times when people are in love, people will say, I can see that glow, like you were glowing. And they say that's a real phenomenon. Like when you're in love, you really are glowing because you're growing. Like you have that growth hormone, and it's just like pumping through your system. And so like a lot of times we always talk about how important it is to send out the feelings of love. So whatever it is you want to create in your life, you're doing that with love. Like you're literally feeling the feelings of love, and you're causing those feelings to pulsate through your body every single day, every time you go through the process of feeling in love with whatever it is that you desire. So the whole process of doing that is actually helping you to heal. Yeah.
So just send out more love. So love is so very important, and I go back to my mom again because she was surrounded by love. She had all of us there. We did so much together, from parties to cooking together, watching. She loved Western movies, and we all were around. So the love just radiated, with her wherever she went. So love healed her as well. Love kind of carried her through and got her through. And the same thing I think that works for many people. When you feel like you don't have that love in your life, or you're depressed, that brings you down. But love just elevates you to another whole level, to a point that you think and believe that you can do anything, and you can.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that happens is, so with the genes, for example, like you do inherit your genes, right? But every gene has the potential to express itself in like 1,000 ways. And so certain I guess receptors are turned on and certain receptors are turned off on your gene. So when you inherited your genes from your parents, they came with certain receptors on and certain receptors off. And so based on what you're now doing, you would either keep those receptors on and off, or you can open some or close some. And so that's what the whole epigenetics thing is that we're not, basically we're not victims to our heredity, that we're able to control them with our thoughts by turning some on, turning some off. And so emotions like love and those higher frequency emotions, they do help to turn things on and off. And just the environment that you're in will turn things on and off. And so you can actually, let's say, for example, if this might sound crazy, but let's say you love playing basketball, but you don't have the gene for it, but you just practice and you practice that thing in your mind, and you're creating all these new neural networks, and you become an expert in playing basketball. And so those genes are going to get turned on, or some would get turned on and others would get turned off. But basically, your gene pool would be, you're a good basketball player. And then you actually can pass that on to your offspring.
Because you turned them on. Okay.
And so when you pass them on, they'll be turned on.
Okay.
And I'm saying on, but some things you might have to turn off. And then other things you would turn on. Yeah.
And that is also, and correct me if I'm wrong, it still goes into the environment and your thought process, all of that. Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is, the majority of our thoughts are subconscious. So that's what adds another dynamic to the whole thing. And it's really a lot of things that we're thinking, we're not even aware that we're thinking. We just inherited those thoughts. And so those things are playing out, creating our environment, and we have no knowledge that that's what's going on. We have no conscious knowledge that's what's going on, which is why we have to use our conscious mind to, because I think we only use like about 5%. They say between 1 and 5% of your conscious mind. And so we have to use that time that we're utilizing our conscious mind and really program new stuff into it. And so we do that through practice, through visualization, creating those new neural networks in our minds and creating those new chemicals pulsating through our bodies. And so that's one of the reasons why this practice is just so important.
Well, yes, and we had talked about this in previous podcasts about focusing on our thoughts, focusing on what we tell ourselves. And, that when we're focused on that, because like what you just said, well, people just don't walk around just thinking we're going to turn our genes on and off, So it is, subconsciously, but, when we focus on it and realize what we're doing, then we can actually change things, So this is definitely very interesting. Like I said, just reading up on it and listening to some of the podcasts with Dr. Lipton, it's kind of got me very interested, especially with with the genes and being able to change your environment.
And I just want to say, I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, that just because you're starting to say, oh, I'm happy now, it doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden able to just heal yourself, because there is that subconscious process that's going on. And if you haven't changed that subconscious thought, then you may still need the help of medical science. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you need help, get it. Don't sit around talking about you're going to heal yourself and you're getting worse every day.
You got medicine, take the medicine.
Yes. Follow, things that'll help you. But this is just something to keep in mind, that the more we can pulsate these positive emotions through our bodies, actively do that, the more healing we'll bring to ourselves.
And also with what I've learned from this is that our genes do not control us. We control our own genes by our thoughts, and again, our environment within, how we think, also in regards to what we eat. But to summarize all of it, the most important thing that came out of this for me is the love in everything that we think about and what we pulsate out into the universe, and it just surrounds us all.
So I always enjoy it. I'm just like a scientific person by nature. I love things that have to do with science and learning about that. So I enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you all did too. And if you make sure you take the time to subscribe to the podcast by clicking on the link below. Until next time, this is Arvette.
This is Diana.
Bye.
Bye.